Hi, this is Dr. Persh. Please call me Andy. I'm looking forward to working with you in pediatrics this semester, and I'm here to intro a recorded lecture on reflexes and typical motor development. This information starts on or about page 79 in your text. So reflexes are an involuntary muscle response elicited by some type of sensory stimulus. There are a couple key features. You see those in the second bullet, and that they're typically specific and predictable, and they are usually purposeful and adaptive. And so when we see reflexes that have some type of interruption into those four key features, we recognize that something might be a little bit off. Also important to note that the modern view of development really has evolved into a systems viewpoint, and what that means is that we're considering how multiple systems interact with each other to create performance that we see in the world. So that information is also alluded to in your textbook, I think about page 81. The video you're seeing in the background of this slide is the YouTube video for 0 to 3 months. Please take a couple minutes to look at that. But I just also then want to give you a few more specific definitions in regards to reflexes, as these are important moving forward. So our primitive reflexes are those that appear during gestation, that is during prenatal development, and become integrated in early infancy. And you see here we've got a young infant, and so think about reflexes being integrated in the first 6 months or year of life. These reflexes are not pathological in that they are seen in all typically developing infants. And these reflexes are also strongly evident and have effect on the distribution of postural tone throughout the body. And so as I sit here with a bit of rounded shoulders and kyphosis, that makes me think of my postural tone throughout the body. A reaction is a reflex that appears in infancy or childhood and remains throughout life. And so you will see that there are a few of these things that start as reflexes, but then persist because they serve a protective function for us as humans. Integration is a reflex, or integration refers to a reflex that is inhibited or excited by higher centers in the brain, or increasingly complex networks that modify the reflex in such a way that the pattern of response can no longer be recognized. So this does not mean that the reflex disappears. Simple reflexes are often part of more complex movements, and these simple or primitive reflexes can reemerge as a result of damage to the central nervous system. Primitive reflexes are inhibited by higher centers in the brain. If we experience CNS damage, those higher centers can't inhibit the reflex, and so we may see a primitive reflex reappear. So generally these are, the primitive reflexes are becoming integrated by 4 to 6 months of age. And it's those reactions that persist longer into life. An obligatory response is when posture or movement, when the posture or movement produced by an individual is dominated by a reflex. The persistence of such a reflex beyond the time when it is typically integrated is an obligatory condition. Individual assumes consistent, predictable, and a recognizable posture or movement as the result of a specific stimuli when such a when that result shouldn't occur, and the person is unable to volitionally change his or her response. And so there are a number of neurological conditions in adults and in children where we see stereotypical patterns of behavior, and those could rightly be characterized as obligatory. Some of those can be rightly characterized as obligatory responses. One term you see used a lot with reflexes is the term pathological, and so I'd caution you on using that language, saying something like a pathological reflex. All of these reflexes are normal when they're elicited in typically developing infants. And so they're not pathological. Everyone experiences them. But that the reflex is inhibited, or rather is not inhibited, not integrated, could be a pathological condition, or that function of the nervous system is inhibited by a pathological condition. The remainder of the video is recorded, getting into reflexes and then typical motor development. Enjoy. All right, so I'm going to skip through these because we have them on a different slide. Functions of the reflexes: survival, protection, maintaining posture, and then providing a base of support for our basic movement patterns. Some of the key movement terms that we'll be making use of, I would imagine all of this is pretty familiar. Maybe not physiological flexion. Anyone familiar with the idea of physiological flexion?
Is it just the idea that they're born in work-class positions? They're uniquely to their program, and teach the extension.
Perfect, right? Yeah, when babies are in the womb, they're all curled up in a flexed position. Legs and arms and neck all flexed together. That's part of developing your muscle length, actually, right? Your body is in that flexed position so that your muscles are long enough when you come out. And so all this is to say is that newborns have a preference for this position. And so if you think about swaddling a baby, right? If you want to calm down a baby, we bring them back into that position, which is kind of at a very foundational level, something that's calming for them. All right, so there's a video of a newborn for you to look at. And given our time, we're not going to watch the video together today. We understand that you're just starting out in terms of your observation skills applied to kids. And so we're going to give you just some cues to help organize your observations. And really all we're asking you to do here is look at positioning, right? So what position is the baby in? And what movements are they doing? Right? As just a very kind of preliminary way to start breaking down these skills. This stuff I recognize may be a little bit overwhelming, because when I see a slide like this, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to memorize that. So, yes, you do. You do because it's important to pediatric OT, but there's also another reason, and that's because it's on NBCOT. So you're going to learn developmental milestones and reflexes once in class now, but I guarantee you're going to go back to it again a year from now when you're studying for the test. And so the stuff that we're showing you here, right? How are we prioritizing it? We're trying to prioritize it by what is reflected on the test, right? That's the stuff that we feel like is most important. So out of this big table, we have a bunch of reflexes. We have, when we start seeing it, it's onset when it would be integrated. So AT and R, we would expect to start seeing it right before delivery. And then we would expect it to be integrated around 6 months of age. Okay? So I'm not just going to stand here and talk at you on this stuff. Practice and repetition is what you need to do to integrate this information. We use this information clinically in a number of lots of different ways. So if I am working with an itty bitty baby and I'm trying to get them to take a bottle, I'm absolutely using my knowledge of rooting and suck swallow to present that bottle to the baby, right? So I'm stimulating the baby's cheek, right, with the bottle right next to their mouth, so that they turn, and that's the rooting reflex, right? And then similarly, once we get the bottle in their mouth, that should stimulate a strong rhythmical sucking pattern. Other ones, right? So using the palmar grasp, even before babies have active volitional movements, we can use a palmar grasp to put something in a baby's hand, and maybe we're just trying to get the baby to look at it, right? To visually attend to what's in their hand. Tonic labyrinthine reflexes are my favorite. This is super dorky. All right, tonic labyrinthine reflexes. So this is my trick to remember how to use tonic labyrinthine. So if I want to facilitate physiological flexion, right? So facilitate total body flexor or extensor tone. So say I want to facilitate physiological flexion and help that baby calm down, right? I'm gonna put that baby in an upright or prone position. So specifically, we're activating the semicircular canals in our inner ears. And so when the baby is upright or prone, those two positions have an activation pattern that results in physiological flexion. So on the other side of that, if I wanted to facilitate extension, I'm going to use a supine or inverted position. And just to be clear, I do not recommend that you put kids inverted, just because it's not going to be all that safe for you. So here's the implication, right? If I'm working with that itty bitty baby on his neck control, right? Neck extension while, right, that's kind of the first, one of the first major things we're expecting to see. That's going to be difficult if I have this baby in prone, right? So this baby's prone on their belly. They naturally want to be in the flex position, right? If you think about a baby on their belly, right, they're all curled up in that physiological flexion. So extension, neck extension is going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge for them. All right, so you really do just need to rep through this. Make this information your own. We're not going to be throwing multiple choice questions at you about when plantar reflex is integrated. Now, to be clear, this content is on NBCOT, right? So there are levels of what's the value of this information for your preparation as an OT. here's a reaction. You have a question? Go ahead.
Follow the question from the previous slide. This is going to my mind. So if you were to see like ATNR past 6 months, is that when you can start to have concern for developmental concerns, or is that window larger for when you would have a red sign?
Oh yeah, way larger.
Okay.
So there's a very controversial application in OT right now and in other therapies called the reflex integration therapy, which very much is talking about, if we're not integrated at 6 months, we need to do therapy and we need to provide opportunities that are going to allow for, and that's pretty flaky stuff at this point. So I would be uncomfortable, targeting a reflex as a therapy goal. That feels pretty far off of occupation to me. And I don't know that we've demonstrated that we can actually do it even. So these are 4 reflexes. Actually, they become reactions because they persist as adults. So this is protective extension. And one of the things I like here about protective extension is that you can see a developmental sequence of the same skill kind of all together. Right? So first is protective extension downward, right? I wonder if, no, I don't have a video of this. And so we rapidly lower a baby and they freak out. So extension of the extremities. And so that's happening really early. And that makes sense, right? If we're falling, we want to protect ourselves. So that's protective extension downwards. So the next skill is protective extension forward. And so this is a baby that is sitting, and we push them. And they're going to put their arms forward to prop, right? So that's the reaction, protective extension forward. So after that, we expect them to develop sideward, right? So, and that makes sense. Flexion and extension are the strong motions of the trunk. And so next is lateral flexion. So we go to the side, and baby's going to put one hand out to the side to protect themselves from falling. And you see this with little babies, right? Before they develop these skills, their body gets going, and then they're falling on their faces. And so then finally is backwards, right? So baby is pushed backwards and they put their arms backwards. And that's happening later as we get towards a year. And so this is one of those things for me that is just really helpful. It's not so much important for me that I know when these things happen exactly. But it's much more important to understand the progression, right? From downward to backward, right? If we see a baby and we observe them doing sideward but not backwards, we have an idea of where they are kind of on this trajectory of developing this skill set. Yeah. Please.
So I've heard someone break down or maybe even group the reflexes, particularly these, in terms of the purpose being to always protect the head and the face.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so
yeah, that's
to the body in general, it's like more specific to the head and face.
well. So I see that. Do I want to endorse that wholeheartedly?
Well, I was thinking more on that last one.
Yeah, on the last one.
But,
No, I think that absolutely makes sense and probably is the function of those protective extension movements.
It makes sense at an evolutionary level.
Yeah. Okay, since we're kind of talking about positions, it's important to talk about prone and how babies are sleeping. Um, so, SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, which was much more of a problem 10 and 20 and 30 years ago than it is now. And then putting babies to sleep on their backs has significantly decreased accidental infant deaths. So that's fantastic, right? Babies aren't dying. The negative is babies sleeping on their back means that they're less comfortable in prone and generally spending less time in prone, which can look like a delay, right? So some of the stuff that we've seen here, infants who are sleeping in supine, so that's the back to sleep, but regularly play in prone, achieve their motor milestones more rapidly than those that don't play in prone. So across the board, typically developing or kids with disabilities, play in prone is important. Sleep on the back is important.
That's what people call tummy time.
Yep,
Okay.
tummy time. You got it. And that there are serious benefits to the prone position. So prone is how we developed the strength to overcome gravity, like at a very basic level. It's our experience in exploring in prone that really is the baby workout that allows us to then, not just be laying on the ground. All right, so we're going to talk now about some of these skills. I realize we're running into the end of our time, so maybe we'll just get through rolling, and then we'll take up more in lab and then on your own. Okay. So rolling, so yes, you do need to have a general idea about when babies start to roll. And so babies start to roll volitionally around 6 months. But you can see that there's quite a wide variance around that. So like I was just talking about with protective extension, what I like to focus on is the sequence, right? And kind of what's going on early in the sequence versus later in the sequence that helps me understand what the kid is doing. So early on, 3-4 months, it's accidental. It's just gravity. None of that is volitional, right? And so all that itty bitty baby rolling is usually just because the head got too far one way, because the head weighs so much on a baby, the rest of the body just follows. And so what you'll see here is, so there isn't all that much order here, except for that prone to side and supine to side. You do not see from side to prone or from side to supine, right? So sideline is not a position that a 3 and 4 month old has in their repertoire. So at that 6 month time frame or thereabouts, we start to see a volitional roll from prone all the way over to supine, with legs initiating the movements usually. And so we're getting a little bit of voluntary dissociation with legs. And then as babies become more skilled, what we see is that they can actually roll segmentally, so prone to supine with stops in sideline. But this is a key part for the end of the sequence here, initiated with head, shoulders, or hips. And so this is something we'll do tomorrow, right? I'll ask you to roll and ask you, so are you rolling from your head, shoulders, or hips? And this is all normal for a baby. You can initiate a roll from your head, shoulders, or hips. So, actually I realized I hurt my back last Christmas, and so rolling in bed actually is a little bit tender. And so I've realized that I vary how I'm rolling. So I don't know if you get what I'm saying. So like sometimes I'll roll with my head first if I want to give my back a break. Other times I'll roll with my legs first as a way to vary what that movement pattern looks like. All right, so this is a slide that we made for you to put rolling as a skill right on one slide. In parallel to this, we have screen grab from NBCOT prep book. Okay? And so this is both to show you right, why we're prioritizing these things, but also to show you that not every source is going to have the same information, right? So our slides will have numbers on them. The NBCOT book will have another set of numbers. The textbook might have another set. Again, we're not going to focus as specifically on, is this 6 months or 7 months versus about when and what is the progression of this skill. So we'll look at a couple photos of this. So up top here, you've got the baby with some segmental rolling. And as I look between the first and the second picture, what I'm seeing is the baby is moving first with his head, right? His eyes are looking at, what is that? Like a little penguin or duck? At any rate, eyes are looking at the toy, so the baby wants the toy. So the head goes, and that big mass of weight starts to move the body. And so legs are next, and legs are really just falling and following the head. And baby's got the toy. So I think that's just kind of a nice step-by-step of how you can maybe see some of those intermediate aspects. All right, so we'll stop. We're going to stop there. I'm going to go look at the last slide so we can talk about tomorrow. So I'm noting that we got through rolling, but that we have a little bit more to go through. A couple notes for tomorrow. So I would like you to look at this slide, if nothing else, just to get the language. One of the activities tomorrow is just to assume and move through some of these positions, right? So get yourself in prone and transition into a 4-point or quadruped position, right? And so we're going to be using this language, and so it's important for you to have it. So that, yeah, that's good. And then let's talk about this guy. It's like we even planned for this. So the wrap up is for the stuff we didn't get to today. We are going to, we'll talk about play as an occupation. So bring a toy. And really, you don't overthink this. Just bring something to play with. And to visualize what we're talking about, think about being in some of those positions. Think about you're an OT helping a kid be in one of those positions, but now you need to do something with them, right? It's not therapy just to be like, okay, be in 4-point. That's it, right? So you have to do something. So that's what the toy's for. So bring something to play with. If you don't have a toy, we can grab something out of the closet. So we will be talking about development of occupations. So specifically play, dressing, and feeding. So there'll be a little bit of group work. You'll make your own tables, right? So what's most important to know about dressing between birth and age 5, say. and trying to define those things. We will spend a little time looking at videos and just observing babies. So we have a lab worksheet. We'll be asking you to know what position are they in, what movements were they doing. Do you notice any asymmetries? Movement of right versus movement of left. We'll spend a little time reviewing assignments. Really what that means is we'll introduce the PBL. We'll refer to this very often as PBL. We'll introduce that to you. Prep for week 2. So one of the things we're getting into in week 2 is motor learning theory and how kids learn motor skills. And so change how you write the letter A. This activity, it's really simple. All I want you to do for the next week is so everyone here writes the letter A in some fashion. So this is how I write the letter A. And that's a motor skill that I've practiced a ton. So let's say that there's a problem with my performance on this motor skill. We need to intervene. We need to change how I'm writing the letter A. Okay? So let's say the new target is to write the letter A like this. So the challenge to you is every time you write the letter A for the next week, write it like this. And what I want you to be thinking about is how much practice, repetition, and energy it takes to really move the needle, right? So when we say practice makes perfect, or that it takes so many tries before you get it, what are we really talking about? We're talking about hundreds and sometimes thousands of repetitions to develop and master a new skill. Okay? So I realize that, so you're not going to turn in all your letter A's to us. But this is a really kind of easy way for you to start to feel for yourself some of these principles. So that's change how you write the letter A. Study guide will be out tomorrow. Next week so we'll talk about assessment. This is the motor learning piece here. And then some applications of abnormal development. And then you can also expect next week that we will assign, so I'm from Wisconsin, Packer. Sorry. So we'll assign that next week. Any questions? 2 minutes over. Sorry for taking that time, but really great to be with you all. Bing. And we're gonna run through this kind of next section of slides here quickly. So you've probably seen just in popular news, pediatricians or guidance on how we should put babies to sleep. Should they sleep on their tummy? Should they sleep on their backs? And so, there was a pretty strong relationship between babies sleeping on their tummies and sudden infant death syndrome. And so, putting babies to sleep on their backs, right, in empty cribs, no blankets, no pillows, those types of things have really decreased prone-related deaths by 40%. So that's a wonderful outcome. The negative is that kids spend less time, lack of exposure in prone. And prone is that first anti-gravity position. And so decreased opportunities to learn those skills, right? Pushing your chest up off of the ground, lifting your head up to look at your environment. All of those things are happening against gravity. And if you don't have a parent that is facilitating play in prone, you can sometimes see delays. So the positive is if we sleep in supine, we'll decrease sudden infant deaths. And then if we layer on just regular tummy time, play in prone, we can expect that they'll achieve their milestones appropriately. And so, prone really is it's a really powerful tool that we use in therapy because we get at all of these things. So crawling and exploring how they're looking at the world. Just thinking of a baby that isn't able to hold their head up and look around. If their head is just on the ground all the time, literally they have a very limited view of the world. So a few of the big motor developmental sequences. So first is rolling. Thank you. And so the sequence in rolling goes from accidental rolling because of gravity to purposeful rolling that is initiated with either the head, shoulders, or hips. So that's kind of the full scale of it. And so what you see is with the itty bitty baby, the rolls from supine to side or prone to supine or prone to side are accidental, right? So the baby's head goes over, and because the baby's head goes, the body follows a little bit. But that's not purposeful. And we also don't see here that they're maintaining a functional sideline, right? This isn't that the baby wants to go into sideline, so they're initiating that roll. It's just kind of accidentally because of gravity. So around 6 months, we start to see that purposeful rolling, and expect it to occur first with legs, right? So baby will look and then start to perform their roll with independent right or left leg movements. Again, we see the big developmental variance around when babies are able to kind of really become specialized in their rolling. Prone to side, side to prone, all the different variations thereof. And then it's also typical that roll comes from these different body parts. So one of the things I want you to do when you're on the mat is just do your normal roll, right? So roll how you roll in bed, and think about how do you roll? Are you rolling with your head, your shoulders, your hips? What is that? And then try to do it the other ways. Maybe just think about what would that look like if you didn't have the capability to initiate the roll that in the way that you do. So this is the slide we put together. It's based off of NBCOT study guides. And so this is similar information, right? The numbers aren't going to be exactly the same. But again, focusing on the sequence of skills. So this is a nice photo of that young baby who is accidentally rolling from supine to sideline because of the weight of his head and I suppose his or her head and legs, right? So in the first photo, we see head looking at the toy. Baby wants the toy, looking more, so the legs follow the head, and we've accidentally rolled from supine to side. All right, creeping and crawling are different things. And so we'll use those words deliberately. So crawling is belly on the floor. And so if you look developmentally, we're saying crawling, belly on the floor is kind of the earliest manifestation of this skill set. And then what's happening both is that the baby is, so as baby is belly on the floor, they're getting more exposure to and experience with this anti-gravity position, right? So belly on the floor is going to go to a 4-point position pretty pretty quickly. And so that's what creeping becomes, right? So it's moving, creeping on hands and feet. So that's what this baby is doing here. So rolling, I'm looking at expecting rolling at about 6 months of age. Yes? So crawling is going to be right after that. As a baby is starting to volitionally roll onto their belly, they're going to be motivated to crawl and to creep. So then creeping is later in the first year of life. And in my brain, I'm also thinking that walking's at about 1 year. So just a little bit more what this looks like. Actually, let's look at the crawling on the belly, and then we can look at the video of the creeping on all fours. So belly's on the floor. I'm seeing he's, so that's a quadruped, that's a 4-point, back to belly. So he doesn't have much endurance as he's coming up into that 4-point position. Let's watch that baby one more time. So that head sure is heavy, right? He doesn't necessarily have enough strength in one arm to be able to support his whole trunk to do that other reach. So you see when he gets out to try to do that far reach, his body collapses. So creeping, not crawling. All right, let's talk about sitting now. So sitting, I think, is super relevant to us. Very often we're trying to get kids to interact with the world using their hands, and that's very difficult to do when kids have a poor base of support or aren't able to maintain a sitting posture. So we'll kind of walk through this as well. The itty bitty baby is held, right? If you put that baby on the ground by themselves, they're going to fall over, and they don't have those protective extension responses yet, so they're going to fall over and hit their head. And so that's why you see, we put babies on blankets and with pillows around them, if they're not actually being held. Right? The head is bobbing because that baby is developing control and stable neck extension. So by about 6 months, that baby is a self-supporting sitter. Sitting momentarily, so legs are wide, and we have some pictures coming up to show this. So wide base of support, bent legs. The high guard is kind of this position, right? The baby puts their arms up to gain their balance. And so, potentially here, the first one that we're going to expect to see would be protective extension forward. And so that's in the same space around 6 months here. So the big difference between sitting alone at around 6 months of age to the baby that's a year old is just how fluid and dynamic they are, right? So how stable is that base of support and sitting such that they can do things around them. So let's look at this next sequence here, which I think helps to visualize this a little bit more. So that itty bitty baby. So back is rounded. We see, that his legs are kind of this circle sitting, wide base of support, chin tuck to look at the floor. So as the kid gets a little bit older, this is that 5 or 6 month old baby who's sitting alone momentarily, propping up on the arms, and so maybe this baby's a little bit older. That is what forward protective extension looks like. But this is propping forward on the arms. So still wide base of support. The legs are bent there. And so now I think this is a really nice contrast. This baby is about a year old. And so if you look at these babies up on the top and the baby down at the bottom, what differences are you seeing? So legs are closer together as opposed to like abducted, wide, far apart. What else about the legs? Right, so legs are straight. And so we see that here, right? Legs are closer, the knees are straight. What else do you see this baby doing? What's that? Right, so he's not using upper extremities to support or prop. This here is a little bit maybe of a high guard or an associated reaction, right? He's trying to do something volitional, and so maybe he's lighting up that other side of the motor cortex as he's reaching. What else do you see? So there's another kind of big aspect of this kiddo's positioning posture. Back is straighter, good. Trunk rotation, absolutely. So not only is this kid more stable with the narrow base of support, we're now layering on top of it, moving the center of gravity out away from where the kid's sitting. So very often we're, with the itty bitty babies, we're encountering kids who we're trying to progress through the sequence. And so we're, creating challenges, for their core strength and trunk, and then fading the support back. Right, you can see this there. I think this guy's an OT. Right, he's not really providing, I don't think, any support. He's there to catch the kid if the kid falls, but very little support. All right, so next up is standing. We're OTs, why are we talking about standing? Well, because we do lots of occupations while we're standing. And again, we're about helping kids participate in occupations, and so much of it will be through standing. Again, this progression, bearing some weight in their legs, as a little bitty kid. And then with increasing stability, kind of while holding on to environmental stuff. So, maybe this is being, holding mom and dad's hand in this 5 to 10 month range. This is absolutely the age range where kids like to be in those bouncers and bounce all the time, and that's how they're learning about gravity and proprioception and what those things feel like. So you see in the 8 to 9 month range, we're starting to see transitions between positions. And I think that makes sense. These skill sets tend to be stability first, and then you layer on some mobility onto that. And so at 6 months, these kids are just starting to sit well and more independently. And so, as I think about 8 to 9 months, it makes sense that they're wanting to overcome that gravity a little bit more and move into standing. So this is that 5 to 10 month old that will typically stand when holding on to something. Crawl, walk, and run. So let's see what we have here. A little bit more on standing. I really like, this is kind of more on that floor to standing transition. And so just kind of looking at this, this baby kind of in sequence, I can envision just a moment this baby was sitting on his bottom and he's just turned over like that. Because he wants to go get the toy that's on this table. So was sitting on his bottom and just turned over, and that's that first picture that we're seeing here. So what I'm observing is first that this baby, so he's creeping to the table, and then I see that he is stabilizing his upper body trunk using his arms on the table. The next thing that I see is a weight shift. I see this kid shifting his center of mass to his right leg in an effort to free the left leg into, he's kind of skipping through a half kneel, right? So he's freeing the left leg, and then he's just standing with his right. But so weight shift, bearing a lot of weight through the table. And then I'm also noticing this kiddo's left foot looks a little bit interesting, or right foot looks a little bit interesting to me. So I don't know, but I wonder if he has some spasticity in his legs. All right, so now walking. So these babies are standing at tables, at couches, along the wall in this in between 6 to 12 month period. And so walking starts with cruising. And cruising is sideways walking while holding on to something. And so the cruise is sideways is reflecting that both of this baby's stabilizing with both of his arms or her arms on that couch there. So same time frame. That baby, it would cruise if two hands were on the furniture, it will walk with an adult, right? If an adult's holding two hands, and then eventually down to, you can see at 11 months, one hand held. You see also that around this 10-month time period, that they are starting to cruise with just like one hand, right? So turning in the intended direction. So instead of baby having two hands on the couch and going sideways, it's baby's just one arm on the couch and starting to go in a direction there. So the 11-month-old is walking with just one hand held, cruising without any hesitation, and then walking is going to hit right somewhere around a year. You see that by 18 months, kids would be falling seldomly, unless they're really roughhousing. And so if a kid's not walking at a year, are we concerned? I don't know. I would definitely be paying attention to it. I don't know that I would start a fire though. I think I would probably say, well, how often are you going to the park? And how often is this kid playing in tummy time and those types of things? If by 18 months though a kid isn't walking, then I would be a bit more concerned. We're also going to talk for a minute about stair climbing. And there are a couple patterns you can think about with stair climbing. And that is that kids are going to go up first. So skills will be up the stairs first and down the stairs second. And that's because it's easier to control your body, right, as you're going up the mountain. It's actually just as much work to control your weight as you're coming down the mountain, right? So that's one thing, up first and then down. And then a couple additional patterns. Kids will do these skills first, say holding on. So holding on to a person or holding on to the wall. Second, they go upstairs marking time. So on to step one, both feet onto step one, both feet onto step two, both feet onto step three. And then third is alternating feet. So, just 1 foot on each step. So we see this 15-month-old is creeping up the stairs, right? So creeping belly off the floor, just the 4 extremities, creeping up the stairs. So 18 to 24-month range, walking up the stairs while holding on, followed by walking down the stairs while holding on. After that is up, marking time, and then down, marking time, and then alternating feet up and down.
Marking time just means that they go like both feet on each step.
Yes. All right, so these are the skills we wanted to highlight, right? So studying these developmental milestones, I really do think you have to make it your own. So kind of whatever study style or strategy you have, I think you need to make this your own. This was figure out a way to rep through it a couple times. Again, we're not. Certainly we will ask you about milestones and at about what age would you expect this or that. But to be clear, I don't think there's huge value in just memorizing this stuff for memorization's sake, right? I can't go through these tables and just list them off. So this will be useful for you in the context of pediatrics and also in the context of NBCOT. So a resource just to orient you to is this Tools to Grow. So, it's basically just an pediatric OT blog. So that's not certainly the best or only one, but it's one that I found to be pretty useful. And so this is one of the graphics from them, just the examples of various developmental positions. And so thinking about how do we work with children in these positions, support them in these positions, help them move between them, and also engage them. Right? So I really like that a lot of these are showing you that the kid is doing something while they're in them. So that is going to be the end of lecture for today.